At any rate, we'll move on to the next game. And that one, we're looking at Voodoo played Raiders in Week 9. This was a 95-71 win for Voodoo over the Raiders. Voodoo with the win moves to 3-6. He's taken on Big Dog. We mentioned he played Big Dog in Week 6 and lost. Some things to note here. He didn't have Maurice Jones-Drew last week and still popped a 95, due largely in part to that Green Bay Packers defense that just absolutely destroyed the Cowboys. Talk about a pathetic team. I'm going to get off the subject for a second. How about Wade Phillips finally getting let go? Was that not the thing to do? I mean, I remember when they lost a few weeks back, they interviewed Jerry Jones. He says, I did the research. It's not a real great move to fire your coach in the middle of the season. I'll tell you what, though. When you watch a team show up on the field, I shouldn't even say show up, stand on the field and get absolutely obliterated week after week with no effort, you've got to look at leadership. You can't get rid of every player on the team. They have to look at somebody for leadership. Wade Phillips is supposed to be that guy. Obviously, he's not. You cut the coach loose, and you lose the rest of the games if that's what happens, and you say, hey, at least we got some effort out of our players because we made a leadership change. And I don't know if Jason Garrett's the answer, but I know you can't leave Wade Phillips in that job for another second. That guy is a born loser. Sorry, Buffalo. I know you liked him coaching that team, but the guy he's like Chan Gailey. I mean, there's certain guys you give jobs to in coaching, and you got to sit back and go as a fan, well, we're not winning the Super Bowl with this guy. And Wade Phillips fits that bill. Chan Gailey fits that bill. Norv Turner fits that bill, among many others. So again, I digress. It was Voodoo getting the win. Voodoo's playing against Big Dog. He's picking up Maurice Jones-Drew back into the lineup. Didn't even have him last week and rolled off a 95 with really a lot of mediocrity outside of that Green Bay Packers defense. He gets Maurice Jones-Drew back in against Houston. So they're looking at what could be one for the ages in terms of an individual performance. Other thing to look at, too, is right now he's got Lance Moore on a bye week. He started him in Week 9. Hines Ward, okay? I don't love Hines Ward. I don't love anything about the Steelers at all, except their defense. But they're playing against New England, and that's something I think you really have to evaluate. Another one that's going to have him scratching his head, I think, all week here, that's Voodoo I'm talking about, is he's got Jay Cutler in versus Minnesota, and he's got Matt Ryan sitting there staring at him against Baltimore. It's that Baltimore defense syndrome. Oh, I don't want my guys against Baltimore. We've looked at it. We looked at it last week. They're giving up some points in the passing game. I'm just saying. I'm not saying anything because that's not my job here at the NFFL in the afternoon. Okay? But I'm just saying. He's got, for the remaining schedule for Voodoo to get a backdoor into the playoffs here, he's playing against the right teams to do it against. He's got Lightning and Nutbuster to finish the season after if he's able to survive this game against Big Dog coming up. For the Raiders, again, he lost that game 95-71 to Voodoo. He moves to 3-6. He's got Killer Whale in Week 10, followed by Silver Bullets and Big Dog to finish the year. So Raiders' inaugural season in the NFFL is not shaping up to be a memorable one with this kind of schedule remaining. In Week 6, he did play the Killer Whales, lost to them 111-89, so they got a little history there from earlier in the season. And I think on this particular game, again, not a lot of bye week stuff to panic about other than defenses for the Raiders. It's the Raiders' defense is out of commission this week. I think you got to look at Mike Wallace. You got Andre Johnson and Anquan Bolden in there, and hey, those are great receivers, and I wouldn't mind having either one of them or both of them on my team. Andre Johnson, you have to put him in every week, even if he scores 4 points like he just did this past week, because you don't know what he's going to do, and it's that potential that keeps you hanging on, kind of like Calvin Johnson. But Anquan Bolden, man, I don't know. After that one humongous week earlier in the season against the Browns where he went for like 39 fantasy points, the guy's been pretty pedestrian. And he gets 2 points this past week, 2 catches the whole entire game for 28 yards. And you're supposed to be like the guy in the whole passing game. And apparently you're not. And you're looking at Mike Wallace running around. Big Ben seems to have a new favorite target. I've been watching these games, and it's like Hines Ward is deteriorating from an age standpoint a little bit. Mike Wallace is bursting onto the scene. And if the guy caught everything that was thrown at him, I'm talking about some disgusting drops he had this past game, his numbers could be out of this world. I think you got to evaluate him, especially when you're taking on that New England Patriots defense with a very porous, weak, young secondary. Again, it's not my job to set your lineup for you, but I'm just saying. And then, of course, for the defense, he doesn't have a defense really on the roster that you want to start right at this time, so probably going to be looking in the free agency pool for something there. That's the Raiders we're talking about. So that's that game there. Let's move on to the final game in Week 9 that we're going to talk about here. This was the Pig Pen, the lowest scoring game of the week in terms of the winner's output. It was Nutbuster versus Lightning. Imagine that, 76-70, a huge game. Don't let the low score fool you. The game was big, okay, while the scores were not. And it was big in the sense of these two teams going into it had the same 3-5 record, with that number 6 seed being firmly placed on the line. With Rattlers and Raiders losing, it became even more important, or I should say even more, I'm not going to say the word important, but it became a bigger win for whoever was to win that game to get the victory there, because with that win now, Nutbuster, who took the game 76-70, he moves to 4-5 and locks up that number 6 seed at least for another week, with a couple games to go against upcoming here Geekmaster. Again, big game, 5 seed versus 6 seed. Then he's got Big Dog and Voodoo to close out the year. So Nutbuster is in a spot now where he's going to control his own destiny, which is always nice when you don't have to worry about relying on somebody else to lose for you, as it has been in the past couple of weeks. In Week 10, we mentioned Nuts playing Geek. On that particular game here, looking at Nutbuster's roster, he's going to lose Darren McFadden on a bye week. It's kind of a big deal for him. He's got Steven Jackson coming back, thankfully, against the 49ers. Not a bad matchup. But the problem is, looking things over, Matt Forte is going to have to stay in that starting lineup barring some kind of a free agent miracle, and that's just the latest Mike Martz murder victim. And that's one thing I'd like to pose to you guys for the message board or email or whatever. Why is it that when Mike Martz was in St. Louis, he took Marshall Faulk's game to another level from a fantasy standpoint? Passing, receiving, I should say, rushing. It was amazing. And I know, please, don't misunderstand. I'm not saying Matt Forte's Marshall Faulk, and maybe the reason is just that black and white, but there's got to be something else, because he has just completely eradicated a pretty talented kid from the offensive stat book. Again, also Jason Hansen's injured, the kicker. The other kicker on his roster is Goskowski, who's also injured, so he's got to do some work just to get a kicker in the lineup this week. But that's what Nutbuster's looking at. And then, of course, Lightning put up the 70-point spot. He got his points from Drew Brees putting up a 20. Drew Brees is on a bye this week, as is half of his starting lineup from the previous week here against Nut. Ryan Matthews, Marcel Reese, Greg Jennings, all taking the week off. So Lightning, who moved to 3-6 and has to take on the number 1 ranked Buffalo Bills in the upcoming game here, that starting lineup's not looking real pretty at this point with bye weeks and injuries. The other thing, too, is he's got the Kansas City Chiefs defense right now in, but against the Denver Broncos, not a great team. But if there's one thing Denver can do, it's put up some yardage and points through the air. So just, again, I'm not setting your lineup for you. I've said that a few times, but some things jump out at me here as I'm looking over the stats, and I feel compelled to talk about it. So, again, it's Lightning. It's put up the 70 points, lost the game to Nut 76-70. For Nut, it was Aaron Hernandez really as the savior, coming off the free agent scrap heap and getting plugged in. 5 catches for 48 yards and a couple of huge touchdowns. One of them was a nasty deflection. I'm sure if you watched any ESPN, you saw it. He throws the ball, Tom Brady I'm talking about, he throws the ball to Rob Gronkowski. It smacks off of his shoulder pads, flies up into the air, and Aaron Hernandez tiptoes the back end of the end zone and snags the ball for a touchdown. So again, you take that away, and this game is a loss for Nuts. So that's just the way it bounces sometimes, and you hate to lose them that way, but we've all been on both ends of that at some point in our lives. Again, for Lightning, taking on Buffalo this week. Played them in Week 3. 112-109 was the win for Buffalo. So Lightning's got some history there. Played a close game against them. Voodoo and Rattlers are the only teams left on Lightning's schedule after that. So if he can somehow survive or pull out the miracle against Buffalo, who we mentioned doesn't have Phillip Rivers in the lineup, which has been his top dog all year long, you never know, I guess, what could happen when you start pulling guys like that out of the lineup. All Lightning has to do is survive Voodoo and Rattlers after that, and he can backdoor his way into the playoffs. So a lot of stuff on the line here going into Week 10. Those are the recaps on the games. Again, I appreciate some feedback from you on the question that was posed earlier regarding Mike Martz's ability to murder running backs in the NFL and how he's not held accountable in the form of not getting a friggin' job on anybody's team. So yeah, hook me up with some feedback on that if you can. And if there's anything else you want to talk about going forward or questions that you have about the recaps, just send them to the email that's in the contact section of the site or put it on the message board. All right, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed the show. That's all I got, man. Enjoy the tunes. It's the final countdown, man. Later.